Welcome to Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time and have a lot more fun. I'm your host, founder of Contractor Staffing Source, where we help contractors build great teams. I have James Faulkner as my guest today from SiteMax. And James, tell me a little about your background and how you got into software and all that stuff, so you can establish your brilliant credibility before we move on.
Well, the brilliant credibility. Well, thank you. I don't know if I have brilliant credibility, but I have a history. How about that?
That's
I
good.
would, yeah, in terms of how did I get into software, that has been an entire organic process. There was not a big plan to do that. My previous life, I had a sign company, so I was doing construction signage, etc. But after that, I had a brand agency, and we were doing web development apps. I was hired by a couple of construction companies to rebrand them and redo their web systems. And I did that in 2006 was the first one for a rebar company. They asked me if they could do some safety documentation in the back end of their website. So I built that. And then fast forward to 2011, I had another contract to do a rebrand for a pretty, I wouldn't say a big general contractor, but they were doing in between 100 and 500 million dollars in revenue, doing
That's good.
warehouses. Yeah, I mean it's pretty big. I mean it's not the big guys, but so it turned in from them. They wanted something similar to that company in 2006. They said, you built our website. It's great. Is there any way our superintendents can log in the field into the back of the website and do their daily report? So this is how all of this started. So I said, sure, I can build that. And so initially it was, what trades are on site just for their, different divisions of people who were there. And then it was a site count. And then they said, well, we're taking these images on digital cameras. And I said, well, that's kind of terrible because, we're talking about superintendents. We're talking about, they just want to build Lego. They don't want to mess around with technology, especially trying to hook up SD cards and hook up digital cameras to computers to upload photos. This is so clunky and terrible. So I said, look, let's just build an iPad app. At that time, Apple, you could do a private Apple application, and we would deploy that onto these iPads. And, it got into, can we do this next? Can we do that next? I said, yeah, sure. So we ended up doing time cards. We did the daily report. We did the safety. It was a field assessment, basically a risk assessment. And then we did photos. So that's kind of how it started. And then what actually made SiteMax happen, which was kind of strange, was at one point I had a meeting with them. I said, okay, so we've got this adoption of this iPad application, pretty well underway. But my background before doing SiteMax was I had my brand agency. I was doing white paper strategies for banks and large corporations and they were called employer value propositions. So they were what it means to work somewhere. And we would do these large campaigns. They spent a lot of money doing those things to engage people as when the labor market was very tight. So moving forward to that, I said at this construction meeting, look, we're bringing all these great images, all this great information, but I talked to our person at the front desk, or I've talked to somebody in estimating, they don't know what's going on in the field. From a project consciousness point of view within the organization, no one knows what's going on. The field is like another tribe that's doing another kind of war.
Right.
They're doing their own thing. And, when they have their company barbecue, there's kind of a transfer of information, but the catch up is just so long that it almost doesn't happen.
Right.
So what I said is, look, I'm going to make a Google Chrome page, and I'm going to get Mac Minis, those little Macs with no screen, and I'm going to put those. I made this holder that bolted it onto the wall, and we got flat screen TVs. And I said, I'm going to make a Google Chrome page that provides the information that comes in from the iPad. So the photos, who's working on what site, what the job completion is, what's been done. And it cycles through that on these big screens. I put one behind the reception, one upstairs in project management, and another one in the boardroom. And we had a subtrade come in to pick up their check one day. And they said, what is that? And they said, oh, this is the thing that we built. And they said, well, I want to know who that person is, who built that. And I've also got a lot of successful friends. They said, because I didn't want to do the branding thing anymore. I was always into a product, something that had some, utility to it and that was worth something rather than just the creativity of me. And said, like, that thing, you should look into that. I said, well, these guys paid me to build this thing. I can't just take it. So anyway, I did some thinking, called a few customers, would you want this if I did this? A lot of them said no, actually. No, we wouldn't do any daily report digitally. We do paper was the answer from my field data that I was collecting. But I pitched the owner and I said, look, I want to start a company called SiteMax. And I had a little presentation on my Mac. And I said, and I'd like you to partner with me. And I'd like to do an intellectual property transfer of everything that I built for you into SiteMax. And let's go for it. And he said, yes. So that's how it started.
Cool. So where are you today? How many people use your system?
Well, this is a very public podcast, but we have in the mid hundreds of companies.
Hundreds of companies. Okay.
Hundreds and hundreds of companies. Yes.
Lots of hundreds of companies, right? And they have hundreds and thousands of employees. So it's a
So we have a lot of people logging in every day.
A lot of people. So now what I'm interested, I've been doing this for like 50 years in the military, right? And I've drugged contractors. I mean, when I started, they didn't have cell phones, right? I drugged them through cell phones. I drug them through websites, email. I've been dragging contractors through technology my entire life, right?
Yep.
And then we came to the latest, which is, project management systems. And there's a bunch of them out there, right?
Yep.
And even though it's clearly a good thing for them to do, I mean, I can make a case for it in like a half a minute. Getting them to do it has always been a challenge of mine. Because I've worked with a lot of the software companies and implementation varies between 30 to 60%. Some people get up to like 90%, but it's a huge problem. And I would like your expertise on how do we get people to use what they already have and paid for?
Well, I think the first thing we have to define is the word they, because the they is different tribes within an organization. So if the they is people sitting at a desk, they have some specific tasks they need to do. They're putting a project schedule in, they're reacting to POs, they are setting up projects. But in the field, whereas, I mean, SiteMax is called SiteMax. It's not Office Max. So it's all about the people. It's all about the people in the field who are inputting data. And it has to be somewhat of a benefit to them. And what makes it even more complicated is the whole bring your own device aspect of this, because you have people who, there are different stratas of people in the construction industry within an organization and different strata levels of interest. Some people went to trade school and they love what they do. Other people have a job that they're burning their whole paycheck every 2 weeks, and they're there because they have to be. They have life circumstances. They have to do this. So right. those people do their very best on keeping their sentiments happy on the job site as much as they possibly can. Some of them really struggle, and they have to do something new for someone else. It's a transfer of purpose from management down to them. And they might not necessarily have that shared incentive to carry out that purpose, which is all an emotional reason. It's not because it's not a great thing to do. As you said, it's a very binary situation. This software will help you with X, Y, Z. There's no gray area around that. The question is the behavior. How do you get people to engage in it? Now,
well, I mean, it is an example. There are Mac people and there are iPhone people and Google people. Everybody has. I think it's like a religion, right? You've either got an iPhone or the other kinds of phones, right? And just putting stuff on your phone becomes an issue, right? Because they go, well, do I use your phone, my phone? So the guy in the field, getting him to care about entering information into his phone or whatever he's got, his iPad. How have you been able to pull off? Because I've had a hard time getting that to happen.
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to demonstrate that it is easier than what they were doing. Because at some point they were filling out a form, and maybe the foreman or the superintendent was standing next to them with a clipboard in the old days and saying, hey, so John, did you do XYZ? Yes. Okay, tick. What about, what was your progress on this? Okay, you did XYZ, and you write that out. And maybe that person didn't actually have to hold the pencil at the time. But in this case, there are things like, well, if I don't fill out my time card on my phone, I don't get paid. So that's like mission critical for themselves. So that's one of the main things that people use SiteMax for on the lower scale of, or sort of more the elementary scale of interaction with SiteMax on the field side. They cross the geofence.
Job codes. I spent so many hours doing this, and you get into the right job codes for what they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's not, we've made it pretty easy to do that. And there's only so many, what we've done really well, and I don't want to be on a sales pitch for SiteMax, but we've made it as easy as possible by limiting the amount of cost codes that certain people can see. So there's not like some huge laundry list. And there's also copy the same time from yesterday. Stuff like that is a huge convenience for them. They don't have to remember what cost code it was. They can go copy from yesterday. And then if they were going to do a cost code change where, let's say they're doing 3 different types of things throughout the day, they can switch cost code pretty easily, and it creates a new record. So we do understand that. I mean, we've been beaten up pretty hard out in the field by feedback. And we take that feedback, and we don't mind being punched in the face with this, because this is how we make the product better. But you probably know this very much, is that construction people, it's like a power drill. If they pull the trigger and the thing doesn't spin, they throw it across the job site. And that's how they feel with that application. If it doesn't do that thing, if that response isn't there, like, the curse words are...
Instant gratification is the name of the word. I don't want to sit there for 5 minutes and try to figure out what cost code I have to use. And is this actually putting in shelving, or is it flooring? And am I framing or not framing? And do I have to take a picture of it or not take a picture of it? It complicates their life.
It does.
And it doesn't look like, in most of the time they look at I just want to do my job. Come on. I'm hitting in nails. Let me do my job, get the damn phone out of my face. Let me do my thing, right?
It's true. The problem is that the job now has been, the definition has been modified now, because that is part of the job now. And whether or not people realize that or not, there's safety elements to it as well. We have some other things in there. We're putting more utilities into our app as well, that are useful things kind of like the pocket knife. So, oh, wow, I didn't know I could open a beer with this. Oh, I didn't know I had scissors. Okay, but that's not the main reason for SiteMax. The main reason is to cut stuff. So the other aspect to our particular software is that the people who pay for SiteMax within their organizations are often looking to replace 3 or 4 other pieces of software.
Right.
And one thing that the people in the field don't like to do is open and close, open, close, update, like 4 or 5 apps. They want to use one.
Right. They got a bunch of spreadsheets, right? And they got to put it in a spreadsheet. And then there's the estimate versus the actual. And then what spreadsheet? I got a Google spreadsheet. I got an Excel spreadsheet. It's difficult.
Well, I mean, that's on the PM side and the super side. I'm talking about just the field person. The field person has to, let's say they got to open one thing for their time. The next thing, there's some report they got to do. It's something else. Then they got to open up their drawings. That's in another app. And then the other one is, let's say, equipment tracking. So all of those are in SiteMax. So that there's this element of, there's just this one thing. I only have to deal with this one thing. I like that. I can message through it. I can talk to people through it. I know who's on my team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all the stuff that I have done, at least I can go back and look at the stuff I've done. So there's history there. So I think that you have to, your application, you can't just shove stuff down the throats of people in the field. And maybe at some point, but I mean, now you really have to get buy-in. I mean, that's really it. And the culture of the company also you have to have, I touched on it earlier, the transfer of purpose. That's a leadership thing. So let's say it's a general contractor or a developer builder. They got all their big dreams. They go to ribbon cutting events. They're all stoked about how exciting this project is and how much revenue is in it. And the person who has to make it can't even afford to buy a condo in it.
Right.
It's a terrible feeling. Imagine building something you know you'll never be able to walk in. The
Right.
passion of everything. So the transfer of purpose is very difficult. So I think that it's not just where we are in technology in terms of people using it. We're in a strange haves and haves not kind of culture right now that even exacerbates that divide of reason.
Another thing which can add to the mix is the whole AI thing, right? It's like, is it going to threaten my job? How is it going to change the world? And I think, AI is sort of divided into two schools. It's going to either fix the planet or destroy it. But it's definitely more of a political kind of, people have an emotional feeling about it. It's like
They
abortion.
do.
I mean, like they're not like AI, yay. I mean, oh my God, it's going to ruin my life. So in a sense, this is still technology, except to another level, right? And so how is this technology going to make my life better as opposed to replacing my job, right?
Yeah, well, I think on the utility side, it's a pretty basic transaction. I'm going to do my time card. It's got nothing to do with AI. I
Right.
mean, in the past, I do remember when we were starting SiteMax, there was this big brother thing. Oh, how much is this on all the time? Is it tracking me? Especially the geofence feature we have. When
Right.
you cross a geofence, do you
Know
want to
if I'm
check
eating
in?
lunch or not eating lunch, and
Yeah,
if I see
yeah,
a
all of that
girlfriend.
stuff. But yeah, you're totally right when it comes. There is to some degree within those who might not be well read on what AI is doing and what robotics are doing, et cetera. And there's this whole threat that it's going to take over my job, and there's a suspicion around everything, and that
Yep.
suspicion can breed some kind of mistrust in general for doing anything. But I don't know. I mean, I think that doing some of the features that we have in SiteMax, it's just ubiquitous everywhere. You're using an app. I mean, I think it just is what it is. I mean, I'm interested in where I see robotics, for instance, dovetailing with this. That's amazing because let's say that you had to walk around, let's say that's a multifamily 20 story tower apartment building, and you have to go and walk the slab every day and set up in the same place and do those photos. Well,
Right.
the SuperDroids guys have a robot that does that, and they get to play with the robot, which is
Right.
cool because they're like, I don't have to go in. The tripod was still a piece of technology, but they had to physically put it up. And was it exactly in the same place? Was the photo
Right.
exactly the same? Whereas this robot will just go and do it. And they're like, wow,
Right.
this is cool. They didn't lose their job. They were just able to direct and do QA on what the robot's doing.
Mhm. So I like it, SiteMax, not Office. I think that's great. That sort of summarized it for me because you are interested in making the people. Because usually software, some guy goes to some webinar or wherever he goes to, the owner of the company decides this is going to fix all my problems because people don't pay on time, the workers don't work hard enough, things aren't getting done. I'm going to buy this really cool software and it's going to fix all my problems, which it never does. Sometimes it exacerbates. So tell me a little bit about SiteMax, how they implement things, and specifically what it does, because it sounds like you start from the ground up, literally, right? As opposed to from the office down.
Typically, I mean, as I said earlier, what usually happens is their technology stack out in the field is too many apps, or they've been with a big software. We won't name the names, and they've decided this is too much for us. We only use like 20% of this, and
Right.
and the bill's too high. So that's another reason. And maybe it didn't do the field stuff very well. So those couple of reasons, or they were on paper and it's a ground up situation. So
Right.
three basic value propositions of SiteMax. So, but in terms of how they implement it, typically it's not really this is going to fix my whole company. It's more like we've been hearing this. We need a solution that's a little bit more simple. We just need to deal with the job site because that right now is their huge blind spot, especially if they got 12, 13, 14 jobs going at once. They can't get to everyone. I want to see a report, and the client that pays us, I want them to get an automatic report with everything that's happened. So there's transparency and trust between them and their client. And that's coming in direct from the field. So those kind of things are what people are looking for within SiteMax. And there's usually like one thing. They're like, oh, I didn't realize that it had that. If it had that and all of these, now I'll do this. Like equipment tracking. Like our equipment tracking is amazing. We send out these little polypropylene QR codes. You get your first 100 free, and they stick on, and you can track where your piece of equipment is. You can fill out each piece of equipment.
Is it like geofencing kind of thing? Does it work on a
It doesn't, no, because those are going to be very expensive per. These are just codes that you scan. So you scan it with your phone. You say,
like a scan you until like when you QR code you'd scan on it, whatever, like that.
Yeah. So every piece of equipment has a code on it and an ID. You scan that. You say, I'm going to use this piece of equipment. Does this require a pre-check, like a pre-checklist? Yes. You fill out the form. You sign it. Then you can use that piece of equipment. You can do your maintenance records on it. It has all of the stuff in there. So maybe it's an excavation company and they're like, you know what? Yeah, Caterpillar has their own thing, but it's not anywhere controlled with our internal systems. And I can't mix it with rentals, et cetera. So there's lots of different reasons. And then they might have a time system with like busy or something like that. They're like, okay, well, busy does a lot of stuff. And so does exact time or any of those time things. But they're like, okay, well, why don't we use SiteMax's time and their equipment tracking? Oh, wow. And that can make any form I want as well. I'll do that as well. So there's lots of different reasons. And that's really why we're doing well, because 60% of our customers are sub-trades. And you know what? They invented their stuff. Most of them. They didn't all go to some like project management school. They didn't go to like business school.
They're mostly, I say they're craftsmen that have to make the switch to an entrepreneur, which is not an easy shift.
Well, the crazy thing is a lot of these people are really, really bright, very talented, and are great street smart business people. And they're very successful. So they actually hold on very tight to their ideas and their processes they've had over time, because they can prove to me just by their revenue, this has worked. Otherwise, how did I have all this business? Right. So what I say to them is, look, we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. All of your paper stuff that you used to have that, Catherine or Stephanie or so-and-so invented 15 years ago, and they made some crazy form that they're going to die with, that can be in SiteMax, but it's just a digital version of it. Plus, there's all this ecosystem around it. So they don't have to kill their entire job process. I mean, I've gone into, this is in the early days, I went into this one meeting and the controller sat there with her hand like this, and I sat at the end of the table and she said, this is never going to work. And that's the start of the meeting. Right.
That's how it starts, right?
That's how it started. And, they're still a customer today.
Cool. So it sounds like your UI is really good. Your user interface is really, I guess, friendly. You've got a lot of visuals and stuff, I'm assuming.
It's just very, stuff's kind of where it's supposed to be. The UI is, pretty much design and colors and feel, and the UX is, should this be there and is it intuitive? And I'm always, being an ex-UI guy, I used to be able to, I set all of that up. In my old days, I could design an app from start to finish. So I have larger ambitions than our team can sometimes execute. Not because it's just, I'm always what's next. How do I make this better? How do I make this better? So they've just finished building something and I think, how about this? How about that? And right. It could be very crazy.
Visionary versus how that goes, right?
Yeah, well, it's way harder to implement than it is. Anybody can bring up ideas. Ideas are cheap, execution's everything. But yeah, you're correct. It is pretty easy, pretty well laid out.
Cool. So James, if people want to get in touch with you and they question whether they're on the right software, they're using one of the, other guy's software is either too complicated, they got 5 different apps, their time card doesn't talk to their drawings, which doesn't talk to their, accounting department. How do they get in touch with you and how can they find out what you can do for them?
Well, it's a very simple process. I mean, personally on me, I'm James Faulkner on LinkedIn. You can always send me a message there and I can have one of our awesome people reach out to them, or I can do an initial chat if there's something, can we just one-to-one on this thing? I don't mind having a call. Right. And then other than that, it's we have more book a demo buttons on our website than we do anything else. So
That's because you're a site guy, right? Always a call to action, call to action.
call to
every day.
action, yeah, CTA. But we do that because we really want to show it off.
Cool. And it's SiteMaxSystems.com, right?
That's correct. There's also another URL, which is sitemax.cloud. We have.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks, James. I appreciate it. And anybody listening to this who is having issues with their software and being frustrated with it, it's certainly worth your time to make a phone call to find out if this could be better what you've got.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it. This has
Thanks,
been
James. I
fun.
appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.